do the next lesson. All right, first thing we got to do is go through that step, that process I gave you that's on the note sheet. Number 1, find the amplitude. What's our amplitude?
2.
It's the absolute value of -2, which is just 2, right? That's coming from this. Then, what is the phase shift?
1.
+1, so that means it moves up 1. Does it flip? Flip, question mark. Yes, why do we know it flips? Because this is a negative. So by looking at that, it tells us we're going to have to flip the graph. And then we got to find the period at which point it repeats, so it's 2 pi over w, and what is w? This number here is our w. So we got to put it over 4, which makes it pi over 2 after you reduce. We good there? Okay, now let's graph. Here's 0, go out 4 lines always, and put your period. This goes to that 4th spot. Take that, cut it in half, what do we get? 5/4, and then the other 2 you can just kind of leave at this point. You just throw it, yeah, right there. You got it done?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, our amplitude is 2, right? So, and we have to go up 1, shift up 1, so we can just do +3. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and I'm also going to go down 3. It's a cosine. Where does the cosine start? High at the amplitude or at 0? Okay, so on your cheat sheet, on something, make sure you made note of that as to which one starts. Starts high at the amplitude. So I'm going to start here at 2. At the first line, it'll go through 0. Then it'll drop 2, because the amplitude's the same, right? This height and this height have to be the same. Goes back up, and then finishes where you started. I'm going to dot it. Why am I dotting it? Because I don't know if I'm done yet. I haven't thought about that. Now what? Okay, before we shift, I think it's easier to flip. Because otherwise, when you shift, then you have to worry about where the midline is and then flip over that. Okay? So let's flip first. This point here literally flips over the x-axis. This point, does it flip? No? Okay? Then take this, flip it, put it up here. This point doesn't get flipped. This point flips down to the bottom. I'm going to dot it again because I'm not quite done. I don't think. What do we have left? Up 1. Shift everything up 1. This point goes here. This point goes here. This one goes here. This one moves up here. And this one shifts to here. Now I've got my final answer. I can go ahead and graph. The only other thing I would suggest is put final answer or something like that. So on a test, some people go back and erase. I think that's more work. Just leave it as dotted. Or sorry, just leave it as marked final answer. Questions on that? Armando.
Do you have to flip it before you move up?
You don't have to, but I would suggest you do that. Otherwise, you have to flip it over this line. You would have to take each one of those points and flip it over that line, and some people will still want to try and flip it over the x-axis, so they make that mistake. But to answer your question, no. You could shift it and then flip if you wanted to. But you always flip over the line that cuts that graph in half for future reference. Okay? All right, what are our domain? What's our domain in this scenario? Remember, this graph can go on forever, right? We just looked at one section of it. And what is it?
All real.
All reals, it goes on forever, so you can write all reals or write it with a capital R with the extra line. How about the y values? Y such that y is bouncing between what and what? There's my low, there's my high. So it's bouncing between
3 and negative.
Good. Between 3 and -1. So less than 3 or equal to, but greater than or equal to -1. And there's your range. Okay, so back to this. I want the equation. Y equals a sine of something x plus b. Basically, I have to fill this in. So not too tough. Let's fill it in. Y equals, what's the amplitude? Why? Because they told us it's 4, right? So 4 goes here. Whew, that was tough. Let's come back to the x. Put a little line there, saying we'll come back to it, because that's what's going to take work. Plus, what was the phase shift?
3.
3. Okay? So I need to find the w, not the period. Some people are going to go, oh, 2 goes here. No, it doesn't. 2 is the period. W is what goes there, right? And I know that the period is equal to 2 pi over w. Or if I'm going to be solving for w, I can work backwards. W is equal to 2 pi over t. I would put this on your cheat sheet. Where you have this, and then remember, you could write a little arrow, A is, B is, whatever it is. I would put this in there. W is equal to 2 pi over t. That'll make this part easier. What was the period, or what's t? 2, right here, right? So what's w? 2 pi over 2. What happens to the 2's? They cancel and just leaves you with pi. That's what goes in here then. And we're done. I think that's easier than graphing. Because the graphing you have to shift and flip and not necessarily difficult it is, as much as it's just work, time consuming. So W is equal to 2 pi over t. All right, let's do another one. A is 6, t is 3 pi, and b is minus 2. Find the equation of the sine function. So y equals a times the sine of wx plus b. Let's fill in what we know. Y equals, what's the amplitude? 6. Boom, that just went there. It's sine because they told us the sine function. Something x, we'll come back to that, plus what was the phase shift? Don't forget the minus, so minus 2, that just goes there. And I know that w is equal to 2 pi over t. And they told us that t is 3 pi. So 2 pi over 3 pi. What happens to the pi's? Cancel, just leaves you with 2/3. Then that's what goes in there. And we're done. Y is equal to 6 times the sine of 2/3 x plus a negative 2. So when they give you this information, it's mostly just plugging it in, with the exception of solving for w. The biggest mistake is people take this 3 pi and just drop it in there. And that's not correct. Remember, this is wx, not tx. One more, and then I'll let you rock and roll. A is 1. Period is 2 pi over 3. B is 4. Find the equation for the cosine function. So y equals amplitude 1. What comes next? Cosine, because we're dealing with cosine of something x. We'll come back to that something. Plus 4, because of that. I know that w is equal to 2 pi over t, and t is 2 pi thirds. Not as pretty because we're dealing with a fraction. Can't divide by a fraction, so what do you have to do? Do 2 pi times 3 over 2 pi. All I did was take this fraction, this one, and flip it. Throw this over 1. What happens to the 2 pi's? These two will cancel. Leaves you with just 3.
Oh, never mind. I thought it just five cancel out.
There you go. And you're done. So y is equal to cosine of 3x plus 4. Could you have said 1 cosine? Sure. Or just left it as cosine? You'd be good to go. What if this said, and it's flipped?
Negative.
What would be negative, Jordan? Just this one. Yep, the A part of it. You would just make this a negative out in front if they said and it's flipped.